Hello folks, welcome to this little video presentation on analogies and how analogies apply to Bloom's taxonomy. And basically this is preparation for your skit. Okay, here we have Bloom's taxonomy. Benjamin Bloom is probably the most famous educational psychologist, and through his research, he discovered that there are 6 levels of learning. On this side right here, this is his older version. This side right here is the contemporary version. As you see, the first level is remembering, then understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, creating. In college, or at this level, you're technically your freshman and sophomore year. We are to aim at the I hate that part. So we're supposed to aim at applying the third level up. So basically we have remembering. Remembering is nothing more than simple memory, like for instance repeating the ABCs. Understanding would be being able to use those ABCs or understand the meaning of those letters, and then applying would be making words. In 1956, with his original research, he discovered that 95% of test questions occur at the most fundamental level of learning, which is remembering. Here we're essentially talking about the beloved multiple choice tests. Multiple choice tests are a horrible way to measure learning because they're simply remembering. And in fact, they're really not remembering, because when you think about it, with multiple choice tests, you don't have to know the answer. You just have to recognize the answer. So in this class, everything we're going to be doing will be geared toward that third level of application. However, you can relax. The midterm and final are in multiple choice format, but everything else will be directly that third level of application, which is what skits are, which is why we want to talk about analogies. But before that, I mentioned Benjamin Bloom was the most famous educational psychologist. We covered that in class. You'll need to know the difference between the educational psychologist and the school psychologist for the quiz that follows this. Okay, getting back to Bloom's taxonomy. As I say, we are focused on the third level. Can the student use the information in a new way? Analogies are a new way of thinking for students. Most students aren't used to application. They're not used to thinking in new ways. An analogies are found in the third level of Bloom's taxonomy. An analogy is reasoning or explaining from parallel cases. One way of looking at an analogy is like giving an example by showing the dynamics of the example, yet in a different context. Essentially, to create an analogy, you must first take the dynamics or key concepts of a concept and find another situation that has similar dynamics. So in other words, an analogy is when you take the dynamics of one concept and apply it to a totally different concept. So the dynamics are the same, but the context is different. So here's a simple analogy. Socks are to feet as gloves are to. You should be able to see the dynamics there of socks and gloves as they apply to feet. And by the way, the answer is hands. Here's an even better example. A can opener is to soda pop as a key is to a key lock or doorknob. So here you have the similar dynamics of a metal instrument opening something. You have the metal instrument of a bottle opener opening a bottle of pop. Here you have the metal opener, but this time it's a key and it's unlocking a door instead of soda pop. So once again, similar dynamics but in different contexts. So with Freud, here would be an example, the oral stage. Here I want to show you the difference between a direct example and an analogy. An infant breastfeeding is a direct example of the oral stage. It's the dynamic in its most direct form. An analogy would be a puppy nursing. Notice how with an infant breastfeeding, it's the same dynamic of a puppy nursing. It's still breastfeeding, but it's in a totally different concept. So therefore, a puppy nursing would be an analogy of the oral stage. Taking it even a little bit further, just to show you how deep you can go with this, the id. An example of the id, and this once again this is a direct example because it's in the same original context, not a different context. A child wants a sweet treat but doesn't want to wait until he has supper. Then he'd get dessert. So he steals some candy and eats it. Yet he gets caught and goes to bed without supper. So here we have the dynamics of the id is all about instant gratification with no regard to consequences. And here we have a direct example. He steals the candy because he wants the sweet treat now. He wants the instant gratification. He doesn't want to wait for dinner then dessert. He knows that stealing is wrong, and he knows he could get consequences, but he doesn't care. He has no regard for the consequences. So we have those dynamics, but in a direct example because it is the original context. An analogy of the id would be a hot rod, say like a Lamborghini car or something. It's flashy, it's fast, so it gets you where you want to go quickly. That would be instant gratification. But the consequences of horrible gas mileage plus the increased chances of getting a speeding ticket are ignored. So you have similar dynamics, instant gratification, wants to get somewhere quickly, speeds, yet the consequences of horrible gas mileage and getting tickets. So you have the same dynamics but in a totally different context. Okay. So in the skit, you have to take two analogies from this column. You have three different analogies. You only have to choose two. You'll have to choose both from this column. So essentially you'll have four different scenes to your skit. I just want to point out, going to the analogies column, you can choose at least two of the three parts of the personality. So in other words, you have the id, ego, and superego. You need to use two of those. But notice, encourage not to use people. Instead, use animals, objects, or situations. The reason why you're not allowed to use people, because if you use people, then you're dealing with a direct example. But if you use animals, objects, or situations, now you're dealing with an analogy because you're outside of that original context. If you use people, that's the original concept or context, you'd be giving me a direct example. You have to use a totally different example, but similar dynamics. So therefore you can use animals, objects, or situations. By the way, you cannot use animals and have them speak, because if you do that, you've turned the animals into humans. Animals don't speak. I hope I don't disappoint you with that truth. Okay. Also, for part of this, consult your required reading because you're going to have to use the defense mechanisms. There's 4 new defense mechanisms that you'll have to use. They are not, I did not go over them in class, so therefore they're in your required reading. Okay, that's it, folks. After this is a quiz that you'll need to take. Thanks. Bye.